Welcome, my friend. Tonight let us step quietly into the shadows of time, where forgotten kingdoms still whisper and ancient fires burn with secrets no age can dim. This is She, a history of adventure, H. Rider Haggard. Novel summaries in English. If you find this summary helpful, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to Novel Whisper Official, and comment below the title of the novel you'd like us to summarize next. We'll make it happen soon. The story begins in the dim study of a dying man. His name is Vincey, an English scholar whose health has long been failing. On his deathbed, he summons his only son, Leo, and a trusted friend, a rugged, lonely Cambridge professor named Horace Holly. Vincey's voice is faint, yet it carries the weight of generations. He reveals that their family name hides a secret, a legacy reaching back 2,000 years. To his son, he leaves a locked iron box, sealed and sworn never to be opened until Leo's 25th birthday. Until then, Holly is to raise and protect him, acting as both guardian and tutor. The old man's words tremble with urgency. He speaks of a mystery older than kingdoms, of a woman who has lived beyond the span of mortal years, and of a destiny that binds Leo to her. Then he dies, leaving behind more questions than answers. In that moment, a strange current of fate seems to pass into the young man and into the professor who must guide him. Years slip by, and under Holly's care, Leo grows tall, strong, and strikingly beautiful. So striking, in fact, that strangers are unsettled by his golden hair and almost otherworldly features. Holly himself, by contrast, is homely and grotesque, with an enormous frame and a face he calls simian. Yet between them blooms a bond deeper than blood, a companionship woven from loyalty and trust. The day of reckoning comes. Leo turns 25, and with solemn ceremony, Holly brings forth the long-guarded box. Its iron shell is corroded with time, but inside lies a treasure trove. Ancient parchments, brittle as dead leaves, and a fragment of pottery etched with faint curling symbols. On its cracked surface are words written in a forgotten tongue, which Holly, scholar that he is, painstakingly translates. What emerges is a legend so strange, so haunting, it seems to stretch from myth into reality. It tells of Callicrates, a Greek priest of Apollo who long ago traveled into the depths of Africa and encountered a woman of unearthly beauty, Ayesha. She was no mortal queen, but something beyond time itself. She had bathed in the sacred fire of life, and from that day forward she had never aged. She was worshipped as she who must be obeyed, a goddess and a terror to all who dwelt in her shadow. But there was more. The fragment revealed that Leo himself was descended from Callicrates. 2,000 years had passed since that fateful encounter, and now the blood of the ancient priest lived again in this young Englishman. The implication was clear. Fate had wound its spiral, and Leo was destined to meet the immortal queen who had waited across the centuries. Holly, skeptical yet bound by his promise, could not dismiss the strange pull of the tale. Job, the faithful servant, muttered about witchcraft and sorcery, but even he would not abandon his master. The three of them stood before the relics in the lamplight, their faces lit with awe and dread. Somewhere far beyond the seas lay a ruined city called Kor, a cradle of forgotten knowledge, and within its crumbling stones a woman who had defied death itself. The weight of inheritance pressed upon Leo. He was young, strong, and wealthy now, yet all the privileges of England seemed suddenly pale compared to the lure of this destiny. He felt as though unseen hands were tugging him toward a land he had never known, toward a woman who might be both his greatest love and his doom. And so the decision was made. They would leave the comforts of Oxford behind. They would follow the riddle of the ancient shard, cross the seas, and step into the unknown. The iron box, once a burden, was now a compass pointing them toward the heart of Africa, toward the veil of mystery that concealed she who must be obeyed. The fire of adventure had been lit. and once it began to burn, there was no extinguishing it. The iron box had contained more than a single shard. As the lamplight flickered over the contents, Holly and Leo discovered ancient manuscripts wrapped in layers of crumbling linen. The scent of age rose up like dust from a tomb, dry and papery, as if the voices of the dead still clung to the fragile rolls. Holly unwrapped them with careful hands, fearful of destroying the brittle fragments, yet compelled by the mystery his dying friend had pressed upon him. Inside, he found Greek letters etched in a firm, elegant hand, words that spoke across centuries, a confession written by Callicrates himself. The script told of a forbidden love with a woman named Ayesha, a priestess who wielded powers beyond human understanding. She had lured him into the heart of Africa, promising eternity. Yet jealousy and suspicion had driven her to strike him down in a fit of rage, and ever since, she had lingered in her ancient halls, waiting for his soul to be reborn. Leo listened, transfixed as the story unfolded. Could it be true that his blood carried the line of this murdered priest? His own features, golden hair and noble bearing, seemed to echo those described in the brittle scrolls. A strange fire stirred in him, something between dread and longing, as though a shadow older than memory had awakened in his heart. Holly, with all his scholarship, could not dismiss it as mere fancy. The relics were too real, the tale too vivid, the dying father's insistence too desperate. Among the contents of the chest was also a map, drawn in fading lines, guiding the reader into the heart of a vast continent, into the unknown wilderness of Africa. It spoke of a river of death, of swamps and mountains, of a hidden city named Kor, where the queen waited by the pillar of fire. The destination sounded less like a place on earth and more like a dream drawn upon stone. Yet Leo, his spirit ablaze with destiny, was resolute. This quest, he believed, was the fulfillment of his bloodline's fate. To seek out Ayesha was not a choice. It was his inheritance. And Holly, though skeptical, could not abandon the son of the friend he had sworn to guide. Their servant Job, loyal but deeply fearful, agreed to follow, though he muttered darkly of heathen lands and sorcery. Thus their preparations began. They sold portions of the fortune Vincey had left behind, purchased maps, charts, weapons, and supplies. Then came the voyage, a ship bound for Africa, cutting across the restless sea. Days stretched into weeks, the horizon endless, the nights alive with stars that glittered like ancient watchers. Storms rose to test their courage, winds shrieking, sails tearing, waves crashing like mountains upon their fragile vessel. More than once, Leo's eyes met Holly's in silence, each man silently wondering if destiny's hand had led them not to glory but to their deaths. But the storm passed, leaving the ship battered yet afloat, and at last the jagged outline of Africa appeared on the horizon. Dark, immense, unknowable. The land itself seemed to brood beneath a sky heavy with thunderclouds. The sailors, whispering nervously of curses and spirits, muttered prayers under their breath. They spoke of a tribe who lived inland, a people feared for their savage rites, and whispered to serve a queen older than memory. When the anchor dropped near the desolate coastline, the travelers stepped into a world unlike any they had known. Vast swamps stretched out before them, the air heavy with the stench of decay and the cries of unseen creatures. The jungle pressed close, thick with vines that coiled like serpents and flowers that glowed faintly in the dim light. Each step forward was a battle against the sucking mud, the feverish heat, and the invisible eyes that watched from the shadows. Leo, his golden hair plastered to his forehead, pushed ahead with the stubborn courage of one who feels destiny at his back. Holly, though older and slower, kept pace, his mind caught between skepticism and awe. Job trudged behind, muttering prayers and curses in equal measure, swatting at insects that seemed to rise from the earth itself. Through this suffocating wilderness they were guided by a man named Mohammed, an Arab whose dark eyes gleamed with knowledge he would not share. He claimed to know the path to the land of Kor, but his silence about the journey's dangers only deepened the traveler's unease. At night, the swamp seemed alive. The waters rippled without wind. Shadows moved where no creature could be seen, and sometimes a faint glow shimmered above the marsh as if echoing the pillar of fire described in the ancient shard. It was then that they met Ustane, a woman of the Haggard people. Her presence was fierce, her eyes flashing with defiance even as she saved Leo from a deathly fever that nearly claimed him in the swamps. Her touch was gentle, her voice low and musical, and in the fever's haze, Leo felt her warmth like an anchor dragging him back from the abyss. Between them, something unspeakable bloomed, a bond forged in the crucible of suffering and gratitude, and perhaps something more. Yet Ustane came from the very people who whispered of the immortal queen, and Holly, ever cautious, feared her loyalties. Still, the professor could not ignore the way she looked at Leo, nor the way Leo's heart seemed already to waver. There, in the suffocating mists of Africa's swamps, destiny's web was tightening, a web woven by a woman who had been waiting for 2,000 years and who would not let her lover slip away again. The march inland became a trial by fire. Day after day, the little party pressed deeper into a land that seemed to resist their presence. The swamps clung to their boots like hands from the underworld, sucking with a sound that was half groan, half sigh. Clouds of insects rose in shimmering veils, stinging their faces and crawling into their clothes. The air itself seemed heavy with fever. Job, muttering prayers between clenched teeth, swung at the pests with his hat, while Holly plodded grimly on, his great shoulders hunched against the oppressive heat. It was Leo who bore the worst of it. His youthful vigor could not protect him from the swamp's invisible poison. His skin burned with fever, his breath grew shallow, and soon he could walk no more. They carried him on a litter made of branches, his golden head tossing restlessly in delirium, eyes flashing with some inward fire. Holly, though no physician, tended him with desperate care, bathing his brow, whispering comfort, willing him to cling to life. The professor's loyalty was unshaken, but in the dark nights, when the drums of the Haggard tribes echoed through the mist, even his scholar's heart quailed with fear. It was during this march that Ustane's devotion revealed itself. She moved silently as if born of the jungle, gathering herbs and mixing strange potions. By firelight, she pressed a bitter draught to Leo's lips, singing in a low voice that seemed to soothe his burning spirit. Her dark eyes never left him, and though Holly distrusted her people, he could not deny that she had saved the young man's life when all else had failed. The Haggard who accompanied them were a strange folk, tall, dusky, with strong frames and fierce eyes, but their hospitality was mingled with menace. They spoke in whispers of their queen, Ayesha, not daring to call her by name, only she. Some looked at Leo with awe, others with fear, for in his face they claimed to see the reflection of a god, or perhaps the ghost of one who had walked among them in ages past. As the company pressed farther, the land itself seemed to transform. The swamp gave way to wild plains, and the ruins of ancient habitations appeared like broken teeth above the grass. Here, walls carved with strange symbols jutted from the earth. There, toppled statues lay half-buried, their faces eroded but still hinting at beauty and majesty. The whispers of the Haggard grew louder. Kor, Kor, the land of she. One night, as they camped beneath a sky bruised with storm clouds, Ustane spoke in hushed tones to Leo. She told him that the queen had lived longer than memory itself, that she was radiant as the moon and terrible as death. Her people both worshipped and feared her, for though she ruled with power beyond reckoning, she could also strike with swift, merciless wrath. Ustane's voice trembled when she spoke of the ceremonies where men had vanished into flames consumed at her command. Leo, pale but recovering, listened with an intensity that unnerved Holly. He seemed not repelled, but entranced, as though the queen's shadow reached across the centuries to stir something within him. Holly watched this with growing dread. He had promised Leo's father to protect him, to guide him, to steer him from the fate that claimed Callicrates. But how does a man guard another against destiny itself? The further they marched, the more the landscape itself seemed an omen. Mountains rose in the distance like teeth tearing the sky, their jagged peaks streaked with snow, though the air below was suffocatingly hot. The travelers pressed on, driven by hunger, faith, and the strange pull of the tale they carried. And always, in the silence between drumbeats, they could feel it, as though unseen eyes watched from beyond the ridges, waiting. At last, the ground began to rise beneath their feet. The mists thinned, giving way to stone plateaus. Strange ruins dotted the path, fallen columns, carvings of forgotten gods, the crumbled remnants of a people who once ruled in grandeur. And then came the moment that shifted their fate. They were seized by a band of Haggard warriors, spears gleaming in the firelight. The air filled with guttural chants, with the clang of weapons against shields, with the thunder of feet on stone. The companions were led into the ancient city of Kor, their hearts heavy with dread. Through vine-choked streets they walked, past broken towers that reached like skeletal fingers into the night sky. The ruins seemed to breathe, as though the stones themselves remembered glories long since turned to dust. And always ahead of them loomed the promise of an encounter foretold 2,000 years ago. The meeting with she who must be obeyed. The woman who had conquered death and ruled over the ruins of a forgotten empire. Leo's feverish eyes shone brighter with each step. Holly's heart sank lower. Job prayed louder. And Ustane walked silently at Leo's side, her devotion fierce, her gaze shadowed with fear of the queen who might claim him. They brought the captives into a ring of ruined stone where ancient columns leaned like tired sentries, and where the Haggard kept their huts beneath broken arches that once framed palaces. The sun bled away behind shattered battlements, and fires sprang up across the courtyard, orange light licking the carvings of forgotten kings. Leo could stand again, though the fever still pulled at him like a tide. Ustane moved at his side with the stern efficiency of a healer and the possessive calm of someone who has already made a choice. Food arrived in clay bowls, sour milk and roasted roots, and then a circle formed. Drums began, low as thunder heard through earth. Mahomet lurked near the edge, eyes hunted. He had promised roads, maps, safe passage. He had sold them instead. Now the faces that turned toward him were lit with something older than law. The Haggard have a justice that is also hunger. They called it the hot pot. It began with singing. The voices were rough but steady, a cadence that seemed to rise from the stones themselves. Warriors beat spears on shields. Women swayed, their bracelets clattering like small bones. A great earthen pot sat upon a bed of coals, and when the lid was lifted, a column of steam took the air like a spirit released. Holly's hands tightened. Job crossed himself and whispered the Lord's Prayer with the speed of a drowning man. Ustane stepped forward and did a simple, startling thing. She touched Leo's shoulder and in the sight of all laid her hand across his chest and spoke a clear phrase in her tongue. A hush dropped. Holly understood enough to grasp the meaning. By the custom of her people, she had claimed him. Husband. The word might have been a shield of reeds against a storm, but it was the only shield she possessed. The chanting surged. Hands seized Mahomet. He fought like an animal, but fear had already broken him. They dragged him toward the pot while women tended the fire with a steady, practical tenderness that made Holly's stomach heave. A spear haft cracked against Mahomet's jaw. Blood darkened his beard. He screamed to Leo, to Holly, to any god that would listen. No god answered. Then an old man appeared at the circle's rim and the noise fell a notch, as wind drops when a cliff interrupts it. He was tall and reed-slender, his beard a streaming whiteness down his chest, his eyes black and amused. He leaned on a polished staff with the languor of one who always arrives just in time. He spoke softly, and the nearest warriors bent at the waist to hear him. The name passed from mouth to mouth. Bilali, father of the Ham, servant of She. Bilali's look moved from Leo to Holly to Job, measuring, calculating, filing each of them like items on a ledger. He gestured with a casual elegance that halted half the circle. "Not these," he said in the trader's patter. "The son of the past is not for the pot." His eyes rested on Leo, and something like recognition flickered there, a scholar's delight at a prophecy fulfilled. Mohammed was not spared. The ritual had its appetite, and the appetite would be fed. The old man watched, not indifferent but not moved either. Custom sits where pity cannot dislodge it. Holly forced himself to look once to know exactly the sort of ground they stood upon. He looked away before the lid returned to the pot. Job sobbed a single dry sob, the kind that blisters a man's throat. Leo stood very still. Fate, if it had a smell, smelled of steam and fire and earth. When the drums ended, when the courtyard had darkened to embers and silence, Bilali approached. "You have come far," he told Holly, switching into better Greek than any man there had a right to know. "You have walked where the swamps ask a toll and the miasma eats the fat from the liver, and yet you are here. Why?" Holly gave him the truth stripped to bone. A shard, a legend, a queen who waits. Bilali's mouth curved. "Yes," he said, as if approving a pupil's answer. "The queen who is not as other women. The flame that is not as other fire, she who must be obeyed." Ustane stepped closer to Leo, chin high. Bilali let his gaze slide over her without a ripple, a stone gliding beneath still water. "Keep him," his eyes seemed to say, "if you can." Louder, he added, "You will rest. At dawn we go inland. The way is long. The way is beneath. Beneath." The word hung there, metallic. The Haggard did not build upward now. They burrowed into the bones of core where tunnels ran like veins and stairways plunged into the black. That night the travelers lay on mats in a chamber whose roof was painted with constellations long gone from the sky. Leo slept at last. Ustane did not. Holly kept watch with the old man's staff across his knees and thought of the iron box that had opened England like a door and pushed them through into a world where law ended at the circle of a fire. At daybreak they moved. A file of torchbearers slid into a cleft where the rock drew close like jaws. The light reached only a little way, so the dark seemed to press back with its own weight, like water against a swimmer. Steps cut into basalt led down and down. The air cooled, then chilled. Breath smoked, torches hissed, resin popped. Cave bats flittered like scraps of burned cloth along the ceiling. Carvings rode the walls at intervals, bas-reliefs of crowned figures lifting hands toward a stylized flame. The faces were beautiful and cruel in equal measure. In a cavern where the roof rose like the inside of a dome, they paused. Piles of white shapes stood at the edges. Job made a sound and then realized they were not skulls but jars, thousands of them stacked in tidy pyramids. "Corn for a famine that never ended," Bilali said mildly, "or else an army waiting in little houses." His joke died in the cold. Holly brushed the dust from a jar and saw writing etched in a script whose angles hurt the eye. The dead city had tried to outlive its doom by hoarding. Doom had been patient and had won. They went on. The tunnels bent, narrowed, widened. A sound grew ahead of them, not the rush of an open river, but the busy whisper of water running through a tight throat. When they turned a last sharp corner, they saw it. A black stream slid past, swift and secret, its surface barely ruffled, the light from the torches skating over it like fish. A stone boat, long and thin, lay moored to an iron ring sunk in the wall. The ring was new. Someone tended this way. Someone expected guests. Bilali stepped first, and the vessel took his weight without complaint. The others climbed in. Ustane sat beside Leo, and the two of them turned their faces forward like figures carved at a prow. Holly took the rear, measuring the current, noting the practiced hands of the rowers, the way their strokes matched as if drilled by a patient tyrant. The boat slid into darkness. The ceiling dropped until Holly could touch wet stone with the flat of his palm. At intervals, lamps sat in niches, blue as a bruise, each one cupped like a star in a private sky. The air changed as they traveled. A mineral tang arrived, sharp and clean, and beneath it a faint heat that should not have been here, a living warmth from the bones of the earth. Bilali felt it too. His nostrils flared once, almost reverently. "You smell it?" he said without turning. "The place of life breathes." Holly's scalp prickled. He knew then that the story of the flame was not only poetry. He pictured a fire that was not fire, a brightness that preserved while it destroyed, a paradox seated in stone. He pictured a woman who had stepped into it and stepped out again unchanged, except for everything. He looked at Leo and wondered whether blood and will and fate would pull the young man forward as surely as the current pulled the boat. They disembarked where the river widened into a black basin. Steps carved with flowers led up to a gate of hammered bronze. The gate opened at Bilali's raised hand as if the metal had ears. Beyond lay a hall that mocked cathedrals. Pillars the width of oaks, a floor polished to a dark liquid sheen, and a roof hung with chains on which swung small lamps like captured moons. Sound here was smaller than it should have been, contained, respectful. Even Job's breath came quiet. "Remember," Bilali murmured. "Look with your eyes and keep your tongue. She hears more than words." They crossed the hall. Somewhere far ahead, a single point of light waited, steady as a star. Holly felt his mouth go dry. Ustane's fingers brushed Leo's wrist and withdrew. Leo's step never broke. If fear touched him, he wore it like a second skin, invisible to all but himself. The point of light grew. It resolved into a crescent on a high tripod beside a curtain white as winter sunlight. The curtain trembled once as if a breath had moved it from the far side. Bilali stopped, bowed until his beard swept the floor, and spoke in a voice more careful than any they had yet heard from him. "She who must be obeyed awaits." The curtain stirred a second time. Heat, faint but unmistakable, sighed across their faces, and with it a scent like crushed lilies and cold iron. Holly's heart hammered once, twice. The past had finally stepped into the present, and the present did what it always does when it meets the past. It yielded. The curtain drifted aside with a sound like silk brushing stone, and for a heartbeat the torchlight seemed to dim, as if bowing before a greater glow. Out of the whiteness she came, tall, slender, draped in veils so sheer they shimmered like mist over water. Her presence struck them harder than any spear point. It was not only beauty, though her form moved with a rhythm that recalled the dance of flame, but an authority, an absolute command that seemed older than nations. Every gaze dropped without thought, every breath slowed. She did not need to order silence. She was silence. Her face remained veiled. Only her eyes shone through, two pale fires that fixed on Leo as if nothing else existed in the hall. Holly felt his chest tighten. He had expected magnificence, cruelty, majesty perhaps, but this was something other, a force that eclipsed human measure. Even Job, stubborn, muttering Job, trembled and clutched his crucifix beneath his shirt. Ustane stiffened. Her fingers clenched against her sides, but her eyes never left Leo. She had claimed him once, but here, before this veiled woman, her claim seemed like a candle before the sun. Ayesha's voice came at last. It was low, clear, and strangely sweet, a melody with steel beneath. "So, he is come." She spoke not in the tongue of the Haggard, but in Greek, fluent, flawless, the language of scholars dead for 2,000 years. Holly understood every word, and his blood chilled. The long years are ended. The waiting is fulfilled. She turned her gaze upon Holly then, and he felt stripped bare. His thoughts read as easily as pages in a book. "And you," she said, "the guardian, the keeper of the boy until he should ripen into the man. You have done well. You are faithful, and faith shall be rewarded." Then to Job she gave not even words, only a glance that made him fall to his knees as if pressed down by invisible hands. He whimpered and dared not rise. At last she moved toward Leo. Slowly, like a wave advancing upon the shore, she closed the distance between them. He stood motionless, his golden head high, his eyes wide but unblinking. She lifted one hand pale against the shadows and hovered it just above his brow. "Callicrates," she whispered, the name sighing from her lips as though it had burned there for centuries. "Have you returned to me at last?" Holly felt a shiver pass through him. The word was not Leo's name, but the name written on the ancient shard, the name of the man she had slain long ago. And in Leo's face, so bright, so beautiful, it was as if that dead Greek priest had stepped again into the world. For a moment the hall seemed to contract around them, everything narrowing to Ayesha's veiled figure and the young man she claimed. Ustane's breath came sharp, and her eyes blazed, yet she dared not speak. Holly's fists clenched, his reason screamed warnings, but his voice would not come. Ayesha stepped back, her veils rippling. "You are weary," she said softly, "but the fire of your blood has not dimmed. Come, you shall rest, and then you shall hear the tale of she who must be obeyed." Bilali bowed once more, as though his bones were made of reeds, and motioned them onward. They were led from the hall into chambers carved from the rock, rooms draped with hangings that shimmered like woven moonlight. Servants moved silently, bringing fruits, water, and soft couches. No word was spoken above a whisper. Every gesture declared that this place belonged not to men but to her alone. That night, as Leo lay in a perfumed chamber with Ustane near his side, Holly sat wakeful in his own quarters. He could not drive from his mind the vision of those eyes fixed on his ward, nor the words spoken in tones of longing and claim. Callicrates. Destiny, which had seemed a story scrawled on brittle parchment, now pulsed in the air like a living heartbeat. Yet one question gnawed at him as the torches flickered low. What manner of woman was she, this veiled queen who had lived beyond death's reach? Was she a goddess preserved by the fire of life, or a demon bound in beauty? Was she salvation or doom? And as the hours bled toward dawn, he realized the truth that chilled him most of all. Perhaps she was both. The morning brought no sunlight, for the chambers of Kor lay forever beneath the mountain's shadow. But a pale glow of lamps and torches guided the travelers back into the great hall. Holly's eyes lingered on the carvings etched into the pillars. Figures of kings bowing before a flame that rose higher than any crown, their faces frozen in awe or terror. It seemed the stone itself remembered the fire that was the heart of Ayesha's power. Bilali walked with the solemnity of a priest, his staff tapping rhythmically against the stone. "You shall see," he murmured, "the house of fire, where the breath of the world rises, where she first entered the flame and was made deathless." His tone carried neither doubt nor wonder, only the calm certainty of one who has lived his whole life in the orbit of her will. They passed through arched tunnels and descended staircases that coiled downward like the ribs of a giant beast. The air grew warmer, touched with the faint sulphurous tang of volcanic breath. Then the passage opened into a cavern vast and terrible, the roof lost in darkness, the walls glistening with moisture. In its center stood an altar of black stone etched with symbols that burned faintly as if remembering fire long extinguished. Here the Haggard gathered, their bodies draped in skins and cloth, their chants echoing in the cavern like waves against cliffs. At the far end, raised upon a dais, Ayesha appeared once more, her veils gleaming like snow beneath the flicker of torchlight. She lifted her hand and the chants died instantly as though a single breath had snuffed them out. "Strangers," she said, her voice echoing without effort, "you stand in the house of fire built by those who knew the secret flame before Rome was born, before the pyramids touched the sky. Here men sought to conquer death, and here I was crowned with life everlasting." Her tone rose, trembling with both pride and sorrow. "Behold the place where I slew the man I loved. Behold the place where love and death are bound forever in my soul." Her words fell like stones in the silence. Holly felt his skin prickle, for though her voice held sweetness, the weight of guilt pressed through it. Ustane's eyes narrowed, suspicion sharpening into fear. She glanced at Leo, whose gaze never wavered from the veiled figure upon the dais. Ayesha motioned them forward. "Come," she said, "you shall hear the tale as it was, not as the shard told it." She led them through another arch into a passage lit with eerie blue flames set into the walls. The air here was warmer still, pulsing as though the mountain itself drew breath. The path ended in a chamber carved with spirals and runes that wound like snakes across the floor and ceiling. Here, before the flickering firelight, she told her story. She had once been a priestess, Ayesha of the Arabs, her beauty beyond mortal measure. With her people she had journeyed into Africa, into the land of Kor, where she had found the pillar of fire, the essence of life itself. She had bathed in its breath, and from that moment she had never known age or sickness. Centuries had passed like seasons, kings had risen and fallen, yet she endured. But her triumph bore a curse. She had loved Callicrates, a Greek priest who had turned from his vows to be with her. Yet in a storm of jealous rage she had slain him, believing he betrayed her. Ever since she had lived with the wound of regret, waiting for his soul to return, knowing destiny would one day lead him back to her side. Her eyes, visible through the veil, burned as they fell upon Leo. "And now he is come," she whispered. "The wheel of fate has turned full circle. The blood, the face, the soul, all are the same. My love, my Callicrates, returned to me at last." Leo's breath quickened. Holly saw the color rise in his cheeks, and he felt a deep foreboding. Ustane trembled, torn between fear and defiance, her hand twitching as though she longed to seize Leo and drag him away. Job muttered prayers, unable to look upon the woman whose beauty and curse were interwoven. Ayesha lifted her arms, her veils flowing like smoke. "You shall see the flame," she promised. "You shall see that I speak truth, and you, my Leo, shall decide if you too will step into the fire and share eternity with me." Her words hung in the cavern like a vow, like a threat. And in that moment, Holly understood that their journey had reached the edge of something no mortal man could endure unchanged. A threshold between love and ruin, between immortality and death, tality and death, tality and death, tality and death, tality and death. The cavern of the House of Fire still hummed in their ears when they were led back into the white-draped chamber. Torches hissed along the walls, their flames bent toward the curtain as if drawn by a stronger blaze beyond. Holly felt the tension coil tighter with every step, the sense that each stone was a rung in a ladder descending into fate. She waited for them, veiled and motionless, a pale figure in the heart of shadow. The silence stretched so long it seemed to press upon their chests. Then she lifted her hand, and the veil slipped back. Holly had steeled himself, but nothing in his life could have prepared him. Her face was not merely beautiful, it was beauty distilled, sharpened, magnified beyond human measure. Features sculpted with a precision that mocked all artists' hands, skin like alabaster lit from within, lips curved with both tenderness and cruelty, and eyes. Oh, the eyes, gray, vast, filled with the cold brilliance of the moon. It was not the beauty of youth nor of passion alone, but something elemental, dangerous, a perfection so great it crushed the heart with awe. Holly gasped and turned his face away ashamed, as though he had trespassed upon forbidden light. Job cried aloud and clutched his crucifix, mumbling prayers that stumbled over themselves. Even Ustane, fierce Ustane, shrank back a pace, her breath caught, her courage pierced through by that unveiled gaze. But Leo did not move. His eyes, wide and unblinking, drank in every line of her face, and in his stillness there was no fear. There was wonder, longing, recognition, as though a man had at last awakened from a dream and found the vision that haunted him standing before his eyes. His lips parted, but no words came. Ayesha smiled. It was a smile like dawn breaking over ice, radiant, chilling, absolute. "So," she whispered, "my Callicrates, do you not know me? Have the shadows of death stolen memory from your soul? Yet I see it in your eyes. Yes, you know. You are mine, as you were mine before. Time itself cannot change it." She moved closer, each step measured, each fold of her garment rippling like liquid light. She circled Leo as a falcon circles its prey, though her gaze was not hunger alone. It was worship. Her fingers hovered inches from his hair, his cheek, his chest, yet she did not touch. Desire, reverence, and possession tangled in every motion. Then her tone shifted, soft, yet edged with steel. "And who," she asked, turning her head slightly, "dares to lay claim to him in my absence?" Her eyes fell upon Ustane, who stood stiff, her dark face proud, though her body trembled. The silence was a blade. At last Ustane spoke, her voice steady despite the weight upon it. "By the law of my people, I claimed him. He is my man." The hall grew colder. The Haggard attendants who lingered at the shadows murmured in dread. Ayesha's eyes narrowed. The air thickened. Holly's breath caught. Ayesha's voice rang out, quiet but deadly. "Your law is nothing. My law is all. He is mine from the beginning, mine until the end. And you?" Her gaze bored into Ustane. "You shall be nothing." Ustane flinched but did not bow. She pressed herself against Leo's side as though to shield him with her mortal flesh from a power that was beyond flesh. Leo stirred, torn, his hand half raised, but Ayesha's eyes caught him and his will faltered. "Do not resist," she said softly. "It is destiny, not choice. The flame burns and the flame calls. You are he whom I slew reborn for me. For 2,000 years I have waited. Would you now deny me?" Leo's lips trembled. His breath came quick. In his gaze flickered confusion, but also surrender, the slow yielding of a heart that felt itself already bound before it was born. Holly stood silent, horror gnawing at him. He saw the doom tightening, saw Ustane's spirit crushed between love and fear, saw Leo sliding into the embrace of something terrible and magnificent. And for the first time he understood the true meaning of she who must be obeyed. It was not a title. It was a law written into the marrow of all who beheld her. She did not stride so much as glide, a pale flame moving through stone. With a lift of her hand, Ayesha led them away from the cresset and the white curtain, past pillars whose capitals were carved as lilies and serpents, through a narrow door veiled in gauze. The air beyond was warmer and breathed with a slow, subterranean pulse. Blue lamps burned in niches like trapped stars, their footfalls softened on a floor worn by centuries of silent feet. "This mountain keeps memory," she said in Greek that rang like a bell in an empty cloister. "It remembers better than men." She turned her veiled face toward Leo. "Walk with me," Callicrates returned, "and you, guardian, bear witness." The corridor opened into a hall of shelves cut from the living rock. On them lay clay cylinders, stone tablets, rolls of brittle script bound in gold wire, relics of a world that refused to forget. Ayesha's hand hovered above them but never touched. "These are the books of Kor," she said. "I learned their tongue before your present empires were born. I read their rises, their famines, their theaters, their loves and treacheries. I watched a nation live on paper long after its breath was gone. She looked at Holly, and he felt the odd humiliation of being measured by one who had read whole civilizations and found them slim. She moved on, down steps spiraling like a conch shell. Heat climbed to meet them. The walls were black glass here, veined with ash-white lines that glittered like frost. The stair broke upon a chamber where the ceiling vaulted away into darkness, and the floor narrowed to a causeway above a pit. From that pit came a faint roar, far below, like a sea locked in stone. The causeway's balustrade bore reliefs. Kings with hands lifted, women with veiled faces, a stylized column of fire that licked the sky. Ayesha stood at the brink and let the warm breath wash her veils. "Here," she said softly, "is the world's mouth. It opens and closes in its seasons. Once when I was foolish and the earth was younger to me, I went down to the place where the flame springs forth. I came up without the rust of time." The words did not boast. They mourned. She turned, and for the first time her voice lowered, intimate, almost human. "Hear me as I am, for I will not be twice." She told them then the shape of her story as only she could tell it. Not as rumor on a potsherd, not as fearful chant in an Haggard court, but as a woman who had stood too close to love and paid for the nearness. She had been Ayesha of the Arabs, priestess and scholar, proud enough to argue with kings and win. She and her people had pushed into Africa on the trail of a rumor about a city that hoarded the secret of life. They found Kor, dying and splendid, its libraries intact, its courts cracked, its last kings already bargaining with death. In the caves below she found the breath of the world and bathed. Days passed. Her skin did not bruise, her hair did not gray. The drum of her pulse kept one rhythm while years altered every face around her. She did not sleep as other women slept. She learned languages like other women learn needlework. She was adored and she was feared. Then came the Greeks, a priest and a princess fleeing Egypt, and oaths. The man Callicrates and the woman Amenartas. Ayesha's veils stirred. "He was made like you," she said to Leo, and the words had a tremor in them. Gold in the hair, light in the eye, the proud carriage of a springing hound. He was mine from the first breath I drew in his presence. The soul recognizes its home. Her stillness hardened. But he doubted. Fear in a woman's whisper made him doubt. The name Amenartas slid from her tongue like a blade. She bound him with past vows and the word duty, that little word by which the small bind the great. I offered him the fire. I offered him a place beside me beyond decay. He held back. He looked at her. The tail tightened like a wire. I loved him. I slew him. No tremor now. Just the irreversible click of a lock engaging. I thought to kill doubt itself, to punish betrayal before the flame made it eternal. I did what love does when love mistakes itself for law. She faced the pit as if asking it to judge her. After I learned it was I who was poor, not he. 1,000 years teaches economies of the heart. They walked again. A low door opened into a place colder than the halls above. Lamps made islands of light on long-ordered terraces. Figures lay on them, wrapped and bound, faces covered, hands folded. The air smelled of resin and dust, of herbs that remembered gardens that no longer grew. "The kings of Kor," said Ayesha. "Their queens, their generals. I left them here so the past would not forget itself altogether." Holly stared into empty eye sockets that looked back through bindings split by time. On one slab the wrappings had slipped and a jaw gleamed faintly, teeth still neat as a comb. The silence was not absence. It was a chorus held on a breath. Job mumbled a prayer and turned away, fighting the urge to run. Ustane stood rigid, horror and awe warring on her face. At the far end of the terrace lay a single slab without wrappings. There was no body there now. only a dark stain that time had not scrubbed from stone. Ayesha's gaze fastened to it. "Here," she said. "I drove the spear through him." She did not point. She did not cry. The pit's roar in the distance seemed suddenly very near. "I kept his bones for a while, long enough to learn the lesson. Then I let even the bones go. I wanted not relics. I wanted him." Silence took the chamber. Leo stood at the edge of it all like a man who has heard his own eulogy and does not know whether to rejoice or flee. A strange light came and went in his face. Some deep chord in him hummed in answer to the note of her voice. Holly felt the old fear rise, the fear that what binds a man is not argument or threat, but the feeling that destiny has already chosen in his place. Ayesha turned at last, the steel back in her tone. "Now you understand why I waited and why I shall not yield. The wheel has brought you back to me. Aminartas is dust. Her line walked and walked until it returned to my door." She glanced at Ustane then, not unkindly, which was somehow worse. "Little sister, you warmed him while the swamp burned him. For that I do not hate you. But the law I keep is not the Haggard's, and it does not admit two beside the flame." Ustane did not flinch. "He is my man," she said, the words a bare blade in her mouth. "I will not leave him." Ayesha's veils moved. "You will not be asked twice." She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. The attendants shifted in the lamplight, watching for the smallest sign. Bilali's eyes were grave, the eyes of one who has seen mountains fall because a queen lifted a hand. She stepped past them, out of the death chamber, back toward the breathing heat. "The flame rises in its season," she said, as if speaking to the rock. "When the breath strengthens and the light comes up like dawn within the earth, I will lead you down. You shall see what only kings and fools have seen." She half turned to Leo. "And then, beloved, you shall choose. To stand with me where time grows weak, or to go back to the ants' little scurry upon the crust." They came again to the causeway above the pit. The sound from below was clearer now, a throbbing rush like the sea caught in the throat of a shell. Heat stroked their faces. The reliefs of the fire seemed to waver as if remembering flame. Ayesha lifted her head as one who listens for a far-off procession and knows it will arrive. "Soon," she murmured. "The world will open its mouth. It will speak. Be ready to answer it with your life." Holly looked at Leo and saw a man standing on the edge of a knife. He looked at Ustane and saw a woman who would put her body in the path of fate if fate came with a crown. He looked at Ayesha and saw what the centuries make of a single, unbroken will. The mountain breathed. Somewhere in the black below, something stirred that was not wind. The lamps in the hall had burned low when Ayesha summoned them once more. This time there were no veils. She stood unveiled before them, her face revealed in the full blaze of torchlight, and the sight was like staring into a vision the world was not built to endure. Holly felt his reason strain, as if beauty so absolute could bend the bones of the mind. Her skin seemed to glow with its own radiance, untouched by shadow, flawless as sculpted ivory. Her lips were red as though stained with eternal youth. Her eyes gray and fathomless, filled with wisdom, cruelty, and longing. Holly turned his head away, trembling, ashamed of his own weakness. Job dropped to his knees with a groan, his crucifix clutched so tightly that blood sprang from his palm. Even the attendants who had lived under her dominion for decades bowed low, unable to withstand the unveiled majesty of their queen. But Leo did not bow. He stood tall and still, his eyes locked upon hers. There was no terror in him, no shame, only wonder, recognition, and a stirring that seemed older than himself. It was as though his soul had awakened to a memory buried beneath centuries. His lips parted. His breath came fast. She gazed at him as though no other lived, her face softening with a tenderness that belonged not to a queen but to a woman who had waited too long. "You know me now," she whispered, her voice music and command entwined. "Say it. Speak my name." "Callicrates." Leo murmured without thought, as if the word had been sleeping in his throat since birth. Ayesha's smile broke like dawn over a frozen sea. Yes, you are he. My love, my lord, returned at last. The wheel has brought you back, and I am justified in my waiting. She lifted her hands as if in worship of him, her gaze alight with tears that did not fall. 2,000 years I have endured solitude, regret, and longing, all for this hour. And now the past is mended. Ustane cried out, her voice sharp, desperate. He is mine. I claimed him by our law. He is my man. She rushed to Leo's side, clutching his arm, her eyes fierce and pleading. Ayesha turned her head slowly like a lioness regarding a smaller creature. Your law is dust, she said coldly. My law endures. Her eyes hardened. You are bold, child, but your boldness shall break you. Did you think to stand between the river and the sea? Between the lightning and its flame? Leo's hand twitched toward Ustane, but Ayesha's gaze bound him like iron. Look upon me, she commanded, and he obeyed. In her eyes he saw eternity, a promise of life unbroken by time. Ustane's grasp slipped from his arm as he stood transfixed, caught between the woman who had saved him and the woman who had claimed him before his soul was born. Ayesha moved closer, her veil drifting from her hand to the floor like snow. She raised her fingers to Leo's cheek, brushing lightly, reverently. His breath shuddered. The moment was intimate, dangerous, inevitable. Holly's fists clenched in helpless rage, his voice choked in his throat. Job whimpered prayers in a corner, his face hidden. You are mine, Ayesha whispered, her lips so near his skin. Once you doubted me. Once you betrayed me, but not again. This time you shall step with me into the flame, and we shall reign together beyond decay, beyond the grave, beyond the memory of men. Say it. Say you are mine. Leo's voice trembled. I am yours. The words shattered Ustane. She gasped as though struck through the heart. Her cry echoed against the cavern walls, raw and anguished. She flung herself before Ayesha, arms spread wide, her whole body a shield. Then kill me, she shouted. If you must have him, strike me first, for I will not leave him. The hall froze. Even the attendants drew back, horror in their faces. To defy she who must be obeyed was to step into death's arms willingly. Ayesha's expression softened for a heartbeat, a flicker of admiration in her eyes. Then it hardened into diamond. You shall have your wish, she said coldly. Her hand rose. The attendant seized Ustane before Leo could move. She struggled, screamed his name, fought with the ferocity of a lioness, but their grip was merciless. Leo lunged, but Ayesha's eyes bound him still, her voice cutting like a blade. Stand, or she dies screaming. He froze. Ustane was dragged toward the shadows, her gaze locked on Leo's one last time, filled with love, sorrow, and defiance. Then the darkness swallowed her, and her cries were silenced. Ayesha turned back serene, untouched. It is done, she said. She was nothing. You are everything. And soon, beloved, you shall see the flame that made me deathless, and you shall step into eternity at my side. The veil lay forgotten at her feet, and in her unveiled beauty there was triumph, cruelty, and the terrible certainty of one who believes the world itself bends to her will. Silence pooled where Ustane's cry had broken. The veil at Ayesha's feet lay like fallen snow. Leo stood as if stunned by lightning, the echo of his own words, I am yours, still ringing in the vault. Holly felt the old stubborn English rage climb his spine, the kind that does not shout because it is busy choosing where to strike. Job rocked on his knees, whispering a prayer whose syllables had lost their meaning to fear. Ayesha did not call for trumpets or triumph. She only breathed, slow and even, as if death were a customary punctuation in her sentences. It is done, she said again, not to gloat but to close the page. A law challenged must declare itself. Her eyes, soft a moment before, had set like ice. You will learn this, beloved. Mercy is a flower that grows in safe gardens. We live among stone. Leo's voice returned in a rasp. Where have they taken her? To darkness, Ayesha answered, where all defiance goes. She turned her head and the attendants melted. Bring the body. They carried Ustane back on a woven litter, her hair spread like night across the matting. Her face calm with that terrible calm that is not peace but the absence of time. The cords at her throat were mark enough of how the sentence had fallen. Job covered his eyes. Holly touched Leo's shoulder and felt him tremble. Give her to me, Leo said hoarsely. Let me bury her. The queen's gaze flickered, not with pity but with calculation, as if measuring what it would cost to refuse him now. You may dig a place in the rock, she said, but make no shrine. I will not have a rival remembered under my roof. They went out into a side passage where the stone had softened with age. Holly and Job worked the picks like men possessed, the iron ringing dull against the mountain's ribs. Leo knelt and arranged Ustane's hands, and for a long time did not move. When the hollow was ready, they laid her in it without rites save the trembling words Job could find. Holly thought of England's quiet churchyards, the slow bell, the honest rain, and something in him broke. They pulled the stone over the opening. Leo set his forehead to the slab and rested there, as if the cold would put out the fire that had begun to eat him from within. Ayesha watched from the mouth of the passage, unveiled, implacable. When Leo rose, she stepped toward him, her voice low, almost tender. I am not stone, though I live among it. Your tears sting me, but understand. I made a law the day I first walked from the flame unchanged. I would not bend it even for my own heart. I will not bend it now for yours. You slew her, Leo said, and the naked words made the air burn. I slew an obstacle, Ayesha replied without heat. Once in rage I slew the man I loved, and the centuries punished me with a hunger that did not sleep. I have learned. I do not throw away what is mine. I remove what is not. Holly stepped between them then, because the place where a guardian stands is the place where he is most likely to be broken. If you call yourself just, he said, be content with what you have. Do not ask him in his grief to praise the hand that struck him. She looked at him with that measuring gaze that had made kings feel small. You are bold, scholar. Keep your courage, for you will need it where we go. The flame is near its crest. When the world opens its mouth, we must be at its lip. They returned to the great hall where the lamps seemed to burn bluer than before, as if some unseen wind were stripping their yellow from them. A faint tremor traveled through the stone like a giant animal turning in sleep. Heat breathed from the inner corridors. Ayesha's face changed, and Holly saw in it something like joy at last. Not soft, domestic joy, but the kind a conqueror feels on the morning of a long, foretold battle. Listen, she said. They listened and heard it, a low, ceaseless rush from the mountain's throat, a sound like a sea trying to remember how to speak. The breath strengthens, the pillar will rise white, not blue, not red, white as cold fire. That is the season of life. She led them to a chamber hung with shimmering cloth where water steamed in a deep stone basin, its surface a faintly smoking mirror. She dismissed the attendants with a flick of her hand and stood by the pool, all veils laid aside now. Not from wantonness, but from the ruthless practicality of a surgeon preparing for an operation on fate. Steam unfurled around her like tame cloud. Holly looked aside, a soldier's courtesy, and watched the ripples stitch themselves back together after her hands passed. Her voice came through the mist. You fear me, guardian. Good. Fear sharpens, but know this. I did not summon you to humiliate you, nor to trample your small morals. I summoned you to witness a thing men have written backwards since they first scratched on clay. Life is not a candle that burns down. It is a spring that can be found. I found it. I will lead him to it. Make your peace with the fact. She stepped from the steam, her hair a black mantle down her back. In the lamplight she seemed cast not of flesh but of polished stone warmed by a long sun. Leo, she said, and even his name in her mouth sounded like a title. Tonight, you will eat and sleep. Tomorrow we go down. You will see the pillar. You will step in. When you step out, the years will fall from you as dust falls when a statue is shaken free of its wrappings. Then I will take you for my mate, and the world will be our little garden to tend or to break as we please. Leo's face had lost its color, and yet there was a brightness in his eyes that frightened Holly more than his pallor. And if I do not step? He asked. It was not defiance, only the last small question a man asks when the answer has already been decided for him by a story older than his bones. Ayesha did not smile. Then you will grow old and I will not. You will die and I will not. You will leave me a second time and I will wait, again. And I promise you, beloved, the next 1,000 years will be colder for me than the first. She lifted a hand and the steam lost its shape. I will not compel you. The flame does not take the unwilling. But understand, every breath you draw from now until you choose will taste of ash. That night, the halls of Kor seemed to throb with a hidden pulse. The attendants moved in whispers. Bilali posted guards who did not look at the thing they were guarding. Holly lay on a couch he could not rest upon, counting the slow taps of water behind the wall. Job slept and woke and slept again, each time with a whimper like a child. Leo came to Holly's chamber before dawn, the lamps guttering, the air warm. His face was haggard and in some awful way young. Tell me it is madness, he said, and I will turn back. Tell me I am bewitched, not by her beauty, not by the tale, but by something in the rock itself. Holly considered the easy lie and put it aside. You are a man, he said. You will choose as a man. If you go in, I will not leave you. If you turn back, I will stand between you and her if it kills me. That is all I have to give. Leo gripped his forearm, the old simple gesture that had made them a family before prophecy had taken their names away. Then come, he said, and in that word Holly heard what choice had been made. When Ayesha entered, veiled once more for the road, the mountain spoke through her steps. It is time, she said simply. No fanfare, no chant. The attendants took up lamps, blue and steady as winter stars. Bilali raised his staff. The file moved. They passed again the libraries carved from stone, the galleries of the dead. The causeway above the pit where heat stroked the skin like a living thing's breath. The roar swelled until it filled the corridors and beat in their ribs. The lamps paled but did not fail. The air tasted of metal and storm. A gate of black rock stood ahead, sealed with a bar of bronze worn smooth by hands both living and long dead. Bilali lifted the bar. The sound it made was like a sword drawn from a centuries-old sheath. Ayesha laid her palm to the gate, and it swung inward as if eager. Behold, she said, her voice not loud, yet it carried past the rush as if the flame itself desired to hear her. The place of life. Heat rolled out, soft and immense. Light, not of torch or sun, pulsed faintly as though some heart below them were gathering itself to beat. A wind smelling of stone and new rain moved the edge of Ayesha's veil. Leo stepped until he stood beside her at the lip. Holly came to his shoulder and did not look away. The world will open its mouth, she had said. Now Holly felt it yawn. Down, Ayesha said, down to the pillar. They began the descent. The stairway plunged steeply into the mountain's ribs. The walls sweated heat, veins of quartz glowing faintly as if the stone itself were catching fire from within. The roar that had been distant now beat like a great heart against their eardrums. Torches guttered in the breath of the cavern, their flames bending forward as though pulled toward the depths. Holly steadied Job, whose knees trembled with each step. Bilali walked as calmly as if entering a temple he had known since birth. But it was Ayesha who drew every eye, her veil lifted back, her stride unhesitating, her figure lit by a pale shimmer that seemed not of the torches but of the mountain itself. She was going home. The stair ended on a ledge overlooking a cavern vast beyond belief. Holly's breath caught. It was as though the earth had hollowed itself to make a cathedral, its vault a darkness so high it seemed another sky. In the center rose the pillar of fire. It towered upward from a cleft in the rock, a column of living flame that was neither red nor gold but a terrible white, bright and cold, as if purity itself had taken shape. The fire did not flicker like common flame. It pulsed, breathing, swelling, shrinking, with the rhythm of tides or lungs. The heat of it pressed upon them, yet it did not scorch. Instead, it carried a strange sweetness, like incense mixed with the scent of new rain. Holly felt his hair rise on his scalp, not from fear alone, but from some electric charge that seemed to seep into the marrow of his bones. Job whimpered and hid his eyes. Ayesha stood on the ledge, her face illuminated, her eyes glowing as though filled with the very fire below. "Behold," she said, her voice trembling with reverence, "the breath of the world, the secret flame, the life eternal. Here I entered centuries ago, and I came forth deathless. Here lies the spring of immortality." She turned to Leo, her gaze like a chain binding him to her. "Now, beloved, it is yours to claim. Step with me and be as I am, ageless, undying. Ours will be the centuries, the kingdoms of earth but playthings in our hands. Nothing shall part us again." Leo's face was pale in the ghostly light. The fire painted his golden hair with silver, his eyes wide, transfixed. Holly could see the war inside him, the pull of destiny, the lure of eternity, the memory of Ustane's defiance, the whisper of his own humanity. Ayesha lifted her arms, her voice rising over the roar. "Fear not. It burns only to renew. It destroys only to preserve. Once you pass through, you will step forth young forever. Come with me." Without waiting, she moved forward. Down the steps she glided, her veil trailing behind her like a comet's tail, until she stood at the very brink of the flame. The white column surged upward, casting her figure in brilliance. She looked back once, her smile radiant, triumphant, the smile of one who had outwaited time itself. "See," she cried, "how the flame loves me. Once more will I enter, that I may come forth renewed, more glorious still, and then you, my love, shall follow." Holly felt terror claw at his throat. Something in the flame repelled him, as though it were not meant for mortal flesh. His instincts screamed warning, yet Leo's feet edged closer, drawn by the magnet of her gaze. Ayesha stepped forward into the white fire. For a moment her body was a silhouette against brilliance, her arms raised in exultation, her laughter echoing like silver bells. The flame wrapped her, caressed her, enfolded her. Then came the change. Her laughter faltered. Her arms dropped. Slowly, terribly, her form began to shrink. The flawless skin wrinkled, withered, blackened. Her hair, that river of night, turned to dust that floated away on the fire's breath. Her eyes sank. Her lips shriveled, her beauty collapsed like a flower struck by frost. She screamed, a sound not of pain alone but of disbelief, of pride shattered, of eternity betrayed. The flame seemed to devour her, not renew her. Before their eyes, the woman who had defied centuries withered to a bent, shriveled hag. Another breath, another heartbeat, and she was nothing but a heap of ash at the edge of the fire, her garments falling empty upon the stone. Leo staggered back, horror written across his face. Holly seized his arm and dragged him away from the brink. Job howled and crossed himself again and again, shaking as though his soul would flee his body. Bilali fell to the ground, his face pressed into the stone, moaning prayers to a mistress who was no more. The flame roared on, indifferent, eternal. It had given once, and now it had taken. Its law was not hers to command. Holly pulled Leo up the steps, his own heart hammering. "Come," he shouted, though his voice was nearly lost in the roar. "She is gone. We must live." Leo stumbled, his eyes still fixed on the heap of ash, disbelief choking him. "No, she cannot. She was eternal. She was mortal," Holly cried back. "Only prolonged, never freed. Come before the flame claims us too." They fled, the cavern trembling with the roar of the eternal fire. Behind them lay only the ashes of she who must be obeyed, the most beautiful woman in the world, undone in a single instant by the very flame she worshipped. The roar of the cavern followed them as they stumbled up the stair, heat clawing at their backs. Holly half dragged, half lifted Leo, whose strength seemed broken, his golden head bowed, his lips muttering fragments. "She eternal. No, no." Job clutched the wall with shaking hands, stumbling like a child, his eyes wide and glazed. Bilali, once so composed, lurched after them, his beard wet with spittle, his muttered words little more than gibberish. The mountain groaned and the flame bellowed below. But the queen who had ruled centuries was nothing now but a smear of ash on the stone. When at last they reached the higher passages, the roar faded, though never disappeared. It was a sound that would haunt their ears forever. In a smaller chamber, the air cooler, they collapsed in silence. The torches hissed faintly. For a long time, no one spoke. Leo raised his head at last. His eyes were hollow, his face bloodless. "She is gone," he whispered, as if the words themselves might restore her. "She waited 2,000 years and I—" His voice broke. She was more than woman. She was the world itself, and now, dust. He buried his face in his hands, and Holly, watching, knew that grief for Ayesha had already begun to root in him, deep and incurable. Holly spoke harshly, because gentleness would have killed him. "She was flesh, Leo. Flesh wrapped in pride and flame. She thought herself a law above the world, but the world has its own law. Even the fire will not be commanded forever." Leo looked up, anger flashing. "You did not see her as I saw her. You did not hear her voice. You did not—" He faltered. "She loved me. Even as she slew, even as she defied all else, she loved me." His words were torn between glory and despair. A rope fraying under too much weight. Job crawled closer, his face ashen. "It was witchcraft, sir. Black witchcraft. And God struck her down for it. Praise be he did, or we would all be ash alongside her." His words trembled, but his conviction was iron. Bilali moaned, rocking where he sat. "She who must be obeyed. She who must be—" His voice cracked. "What are we now without she? What is the law without she?" His eyes rolled toward Holly, pleading, broken. "She will come again, yes? She will step once more from the flame?" "No," Holly said firmly. "She is gone. Whatever her power, she was mortal at the last." Bilali shrank as though struck and rocked silently. The great servant of she was nothing now but an old man with no master. They rested only until their breath returned, then pressed upward. The passages twisted, the lamps burned low, but they forced their way out. Days later, they found themselves back in the swamp, the jungle pressing close once more, the air heavy but blessedly free of the fire's roar. The Haggard people, learning of their queen's fall, had scattered, some in terror, others in despair. Kor was silent now, its ruins truly empty, the ghost of its mistress finally gone. They made for the coast, their journey slower, wearier. Ustane lay buried beneath stone. Ayesha lay in dust at the mountain's heart. Only the three remained. They found a ship and purchased passage, the sea winds sharp against their faces. But the voyage was silent, broken only by the creak of wood and the slap of waves. Holly watched Leo and saw no healing. The young man stared often at the horizon, his eyes searching for something that was not there. At night he muttered in his sleep, sometimes crying out her name. His grief was not the grief of losing a woman of flesh, but of losing a goddess, a dream, an eternity denied. It was a wound no time would close. Job, by contrast, prayed louder each night, convinced he had walked through hell and lived. Yet even he fell silent when Leo's face grew pale in the moonlight, as though listening to a voice no one else could hear. At last they reached England, the grey skies and quiet fields of home. The iron box was long empty, its secrets fulfilled, its curse completed. But the memory of what it had unleashed clung to them. Holly returned to his studies, but he could not forget the white flame, nor the ash that had been the most beautiful woman the world had ever known. Leo carried the heaviest burden. He lived, but he did not live whole. His heart had stepped into the fire and never returned. And in Holly's silence, in Job's fearful prayers, in the hush that fell whenever they remembered the land of Kor, there was always one echo, one haunting certainty. She who must be obeyed was gone, but perhaps someday, somewhere, she might return, where she might return, where she might return, where she might return, where she might return.